the presentation. I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening, and welcome to the CSO Brentwood and Redbud Avenue virtual town hall meeting for the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District project number 12139. My name is Jeff Gratzer, and I am with HDR Engineering as the project manager. With me this evening is Rob Kinzel, a project engineer here. And then we have various folks from St. Louis MSD on the line with us. Patricia Pride is the project manager for MSD. Bess McCoy is with public relations with MSD. Steve Kadike is with construction. JB Buckingham is with the right-of-way group, and Saad Amir is also on with the public relations group. So we're going to cover tonight, this is what we're going to go over, our roadmap for this evening. We're going to cover, Bess is going to provide an overview of the Zoom technology that we're using for this presentation, talk a little bit about the ground rules for the presentation, as well as how you as participants and listening can enter questions, and then we'll go through those questions and answers at the end. Bess is also going to provide an overview of the overall Project Clear program that MSD is doing to give everybody a big picture of why we're implementing this project. And then Patricia Pride and myself are going to provide an overview of this particular Brentwood and Redbud project and go through some of the specifics. So we're going to go through the why, the what, the where, the how, and the when of the project. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Bess, who's going to go through the ground rules.
Get myself unmuted there. Thanks, Jeff. Like Jeff said, my name is Bess McCoy, and I am a public affairs specialist with the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. I'll be here helping kind of facilitate some of the technology on this meeting, and specifically helping with the question and answer section. Like Jeff said, I'm going to go over the technology we're using, make sure we're all on the same page, and kind of understand how this meeting is going to work. So first of all, you all are in what we call listen and view mode. And basically what that means is you can see us as we're speaking and you can hear us, but we can't see or hear you. Now that being said, we do still want to interact with you, and that's where the Q&A feature comes in. So if you are on a computer or smartphone or tablet, if you either wiggle your mouse or tap on the screen, you should see a menu pop up, and on that menu is a Q&A function. If you open that up, you can submit questions there at any time. We will be waiting until the end to address those questions live, but please submit them at any time throughout this meeting. Now, one thing to note, all participants will be able to see the questions that you submit, and one nice feature is participants can also vote for the questions that they like. So if you see a question that you especially want answered, go ahead and give it a thumbs up or a like, and that helps us know that a lot of our guests tonight want us to answer that question. Now, we do have a few dial-in participants, those who have called in and are not using a computer or a smartphone or tablet. Unfortunately, that feature is not available through dial-in participation, but we still want to hear from you. So if you would like to submit a question, you can send that directly to me. My email address is E as in Elizabeth, McCoy, M-C-C-O-Y, @stlmsd.com. I'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the meeting as well. Or if you don't have access to your email right now, you can reach out to the project manager for this at any time after the meeting. Her contact information, Patricia's contact information, was included in that letter that we sent you. You can also find that information on this project page on our website, which is msdprojectclear.org/Brentwood Redbud. Now we do have a few ground rules for those questions. So as you submit those, one thing is we are only going to address project-specific questions during the live Q&A. So we're here to talk about the Brentwood Redbud project. We have the right team in place to answer all of your questions about that project. But just to be respectful of all of our participants' time and to make sure that we stay on topic, during that live Q&A, we'll only answer the questions related to that project. Now, that being said, we understand a lot of you might have questions that aren't necessarily project specific. You're more than welcome to submit those questions. I'll be monitoring those questions throughout the meeting, and I will directly contact you to let you know who the best person at MSD is to talk to so that you can get the best answer to that question. The other thing is we're only going to address broad questions during the live Q&A. So if you have a question about your specific property, again, you're more than welcome to submit that, but we won't address it during the live section here. Again, just out of respect for all of the participants. So instead, what we'll do is we'll log that question. We have your contact information from when you registered, and Patricia or someone on her team will follow up with you in the next few business days so that we can make sure we address your question individually and get you the best possible answer. The other thing that I want to mention is that as you're submitting those questions, like I mentioned, we have that website. We're also going to update FAQs on the website. So as we get questions, we'll add FAQs to the website to address those. And so you'll be able to, in the next few days, see all of the questions from this meeting with the answers on our website. Jeff, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, never mind. Sorry about that. So like Jeff said, I'm going to give just a quick overview about who we are at MSD, some of the big picture, just so that we can position this project into that big picture a little bit better. So MSD, we are a municipal utility, a government utility, and we provide stormwater and wastewater service to all of St. Louis City and about 90% of St. Louis County. Now, not everyone knows this, but we're actually the 4th largest sewer system in the United States. We come after New York, Chicago, and LA. And like I said, we provide wastewater and stormwater services. So wastewater means that we take all of the used water from your home, anything that comes from a drain in your house, like a sink, a toilet, washing machine, dishwasher. We convey all of that water to one of our 7 treatment plants, and we make sure it gets cleaned before we put it back into the environment. We're also a stormwater utility, which means that we own and maintain the public storm sewer system. So all of those drains and inlets you see on the streets, when the rain goes through those, we make sure that it gets to natural drainage ways, and we maintain that system. Now, I want to point out on this slide that that graphic at the bottom that says 2 utilities in 1. And I point that out because that's something that we're really trying to help educate people about, that MSD is 2 utilities in 1. So we are a stormwater and a wastewater utility, but those are 2 separate utilities. And we have separate funding sources for those. And you know, we can't combine those funding sources. So when we're working on a project, it usually falls in one of those 2 categories. And so to position this project specifically, Brentwood Redbud is one of our wastewater projects. So it certainly has some stormwater components to it, and that we're trying to keep stormwater out of our wastewater system. But this comes from our wastewater funding source, and it addresses a wastewater problem. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Jeff and Patricia to talk more specifically about the Brentwood to Redbud project.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Pride. I am the MSD project manager. My role on most projects is to make sure that the design meets MSD's design standards, stays on schedule, provides a biddable solution that comes in on budget. Below is my information, my contact information, and I'm just going to give my number out for those who dialed in. It is 314-768-6275. While Beth gave you other avenues to look up my information, it's also included on the invite letter that you received for this meeting. Now I'll turn things over to Jeff. Well, he'll give you his information and move on to the project overview.
Great, thank you, Patricia. So wanted to, again, provide a little bit of information on the project relative to why we're doing it, what we're going to be doing, where that work is going to be taking place, how it's going to be constructed, and when it is anticipated to begin. So some background on the origin of the project, okay? As Bess talked about, there are 2 different utilities in one, a stormwater utility and a sanitary or a wastewater utility. In this particular instance, the area of this project is what's considered called a combined system. So what that means is when there's one pipe that takes the wastewater from your home, so when you flush your toilet, use your sink, use your dishwasher or your washer machine, that flow goes through from a pipe from your house into a sewer. In most instances, that goes to what's referred to as a sanitary sewer, and then that flow is directed to one of the treatment facilities that Bess talked about, where it is treated and then discharged to a river, creek, or receiving stream. In this particular area, it is a combined system. So those flows, those sanitary flows, are combined and they are all in one pipe with the stormwater flows. So when it rains, you've got stormwater, you've got drainage from your yard, drainage from the street, that all goes into one pipe. What that means is that at times when there are heavy rains and a lot of wet weather, those systems are undersized and overwhelmed, and those pipes can't take all of that flow. So as part of this project, as Patricia mentioned, MSD is got a consent decree, and as part of their overall long-term control plan for their combined sewer system, they're required to reduce and eliminate combined sewer overflows or spills into waterways, which are also referred to as CSOs. So the goal of this project is to eliminate a combined sewer overflow from going into, in this particular instance, Black Creek, and that's going to be accomplished through separation of the sewers. So what that means is this project, we're putting in new pipes where we're going to have separate pipes for each of the designated flows. So there'll be a separate pipe for that sanitary flow that comes from your house and goes out into the sewer. So again, from your toilets, your sinks. And then there'll be another separate pipe for the stormwater flow where it rains and you've got drainage that goes into that pipe. In addition to that, for this project, it is a removal of an interceptor and a combined sewer overflow. So an interceptor, I'll just explain that briefly, is a location where the normal sanitary flows are intercepted and they go through a pipe to the treatment plant. And then when that interceptor pipe doesn't have capacity during a rain event, there's a CSO or a combined sewer overflow that goes to the receiving stream. One of the other goals of this project is to remove inflow sources. Another term that you'll hear me use throughout this presentation is PIR. And PIR stands for private inflow reduction. Those are inflow sources such as downspouts from a roof, might be an area drain in your yard, it might be a sump pump if you've got a lower level in your house or on your property where there's a sump pump that discharges out. We're getting those flows and those inflow sources out of the sanitary sewer so that there's adequate capacity in the sanitary sewer, which also means less potential for backups into people's homes. So in this particular project, there's about 65 properties where we are looking at removing inflow sources from them. Wanted to give a little bit of background on the planning process and how we got to where we are with selecting a sewer separation as the alternative for this particular project. There were two main alternatives that were looked at. The sewer separation, which we'll be talking in additional detail about, is one of those. That again is where we're putting separate pipes in to separate the two systems, the sanitary and the storm. And that particular project, or that alternative, was estimated to cost about $14 million to accomplish. Another alternative that was looked at was to take the combined flows, again, both of those flows from the sanitary and the storm, and direct them to another project, a combined sewer tunnel that MSD has planned to be constructed. That tunnel is referred to as the RDP Tributaries Tunnel. And to do that, an adit tunnel, or basically another tunnel to get the flows to that location, would have to be constructed. Now that alternative was looked at and was estimated to cost about $21 million. So about 50% more estimated cost to do that. So at that point, we moved forward with the sewer separation option. The benefits to this project, what this will do is we're going to be separating those sewers. We're going to be increasing the pipe sizes for those separate systems, which to you means fewer backups within the sanitary sewer. We're also going to be reducing treatment. So the flows that during wet weather, that those inflow sources, those other sources in the combined system that flow to one of MSD's treatment facilities, that treatment requires operational cost to treat that. So that's less flow that needs to be treated, less operational cost, which means less cost to the ratepayers. And then also, as we mentioned, we're eliminating an overflow, or a CSO, from entering Black Creek. So we'll be improving the water quality. But this time, I just want to remind everybody, if you've got questions, please remember to submit those questions, and we'll get to those project questions at the end of the meeting. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about the where. So this particular map is one of two maps. The project itself is located in two separate municipalities, Richmond Heights to the south and the city of Clayton to the north. So I want to just give you a little bit of an overview. You can see my cursor on the screen. To the west, or to the left of this, that is basically Interstate 170 running north and south. Then here on the bottom is Interstate 4064. And so the project is east of Interstate 170 and just north of Interstate 6440. The map that you see here on the screen, project will begin down here in the southern portion near the intersection of Redbud and East Linden. And what you see on here in this green lines here, those are the existing combined sewers. The lighter magenta colored lines, those are the existing sanitary sewers that right now flow into the combined sewer. And then the darker red lines are the proposed new sanitary sewers to be constructed. The darker blue lines that you see here and in other locations are proposed stormwater pipes that are going in. So for instance, like down here along Bryan Avenue, it's maybe difficult to see, there's an existing combined sewer that runs along Bryan Avenue. We're constructing a new storm sewer, and we're taking the stormwater flows from the street, and they will go into the existing combined sewer, which will be reused as a storm sewer. In addition to that, what I want to point out on this map is I mentioned those inflow source reductions. So those, the PIR, the private inflow reduction locations, those are noted in this hatched or green areas here. So those are individual properties where there's proposed inflow source removal to be accomplished. The other thing I want to point out is in these orange hatched areas, those are locations where we need to take the pipe connection, referred to as a sewer lateral, from those homes that are currently connected to the existing combined sewer that runs in the backyards and in between these houses. We've got to disconnect those from the existing combined sewer and then reconnect them to the new sanitary sewer. So now I'm going to jump to the northern portion of the project. So in the northern portion of the project, the green again is the same inflow source removal locations. The orange, the same locations where we need to remove a lateral, an existing lateral, and reconnect it to either a new sanitary sewer or the existing sanitary sewer in that area. And then the red is a new sanitary line, sanitary sewer that will be running along Bemiston Avenue up to about Davis Drive. And then the blue line is a new storm sewer on Davis Drive. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Patricia to give you a little bit of information about the project facts.
As Jeff mentioned, the overall goal is to separate the sewer shed and eliminate a combined sewer overflow, which will prevent untreated wastewater from getting into our local waterways, and it will reduce basement backups. To achieve this, MSD will need to construct some sewers. The sanitary sewer reaches will be approximately 9,200 feet. The depth ranges from 10 to 30 feet, and the size of the sewers range from 6-inch to 30-inch. We will also be constructing storm sewers, approximately 4,200 feet of storm sewer, where the depth ranged from 5 feet to 15 feet, with the diameter pipe of 12-inch to 21-inch. As Jeff mentioned previously about the lateral relocations, we'll have to do several on this job. Laterals are currently connected to the combined sewer. We will have to disconnect those laterals from the combined sewer and reconnect them to the new sanitary sewer, which is dedicated for wastewater only. Now, the slide here lists 21 properties where the lateral relocations will take place. That's on private properties. There will be numerous lateral relocations that take place throughout this project area within the street right-of-way. The next thing we have on our list that we would need to disconnect would be the private inflow sources. And these are on approximately 65 properties. And as Jeff mentioned before, those are private inflow sources like downspouts and driveway drains and sometimes sump pumps. And lastly, we will be eliminating the interceptor. The interceptor that sends the flow to the wastewater treatment plant will be removed, and the combined sewer overflow at the end of this construction project will become a stormwater outfall with a dedicated stormwater sewer, which will effectively meet the consent decree requirements.
Great, thank you, Patricia. So Patricia provided some information on the what. So we've talked about the why, we've talked about the where, we've talked about the what. Now we're going to talk about the how. How will this project be constructed? So there's two main methods of construction that are anticipated for this project: open cut construction and tunneling. So open cut construction is sounds just like it sounds. Basically what that consists of is you get a backhoe or a piece of equipment that comes in and excavates a trench in the location where the sewer needs to go. Once you're down to the elevation that is needed for that new sewer, they'll put some bedding material in the bottom of the trench. Then they'll put the pipe in the trench. They'll install the manholes, and the manholes are the locations where MSD folks have access to get into the sewer to maintain the sewer if needed. Once that's done, they'll backfill over top of the pipe, and they'll bring that backfill back up to grade. The other method of construction is a tunneling option. So the tunneling option, we have 4 locations for this project where we'll be doing tunneling. And what the tunneling consists of is digging a trench or a pit on each end of that location. And then the pipe itself is actually installed what's called trenchless. So there's no disruption to the surface in that area. So that's the positive side of the tunneling construction method, is that it's less disruptive to portions on the surface. However, the trenchless or the tunneling method of construction for installing sewers is significantly more expensive than the open cut method. The other part that I wanted to mention is the type of equipment that would be used to construct this. So for the open cut method, there'll be typically a backhoe that's used to come in and dig the trench. There also will be trucks that will bring the actual piping in. There'll be dump trucks that come in to bring the backfill or the bedding material that needs to go into the trench to construct the sewer, as well as to remove any of the excess material that it cannot be used in the backfill of the trench. For the tunneling method, there'll be a tunnel boring machine that'll be placed into one of the pits on either end of the locations where we're doing that. So just Real briefly, the tunneling locations, there's 4 of them. One of them is underneath the Metrolink Bridge along East Linden, and that's being done with a trenchless or a tunneling method due to the vertical availability underneath there to get construction equipment in there. And then another location is across Clayton Road. So we understand Clayton's a very heavily traveled corridor. So we don't want to disrupt Clayton Road, as well as there are multiple utilities that are currently under Clayton Road, including 2 large water mains that provide drinking water to the city of St. Louis's main reservoir. And then there's 2 other locations, one on an alley just north of Clayton Road and west of Bemiston, to avoid actually disturbing a structure or a building, as well as being able to continue to provide electrical service on a couple of power poles that are there. And then another location on Winsenberg where we need to get underneath the existing combined sewer. So during construction, what can residents expect during construction? So first I wanted to just talk real briefly about easements. A portion of the sewers, if they have to go onto a private property, we go through an easement process. And what that means is if the sewer needs to go across your property, MSD will be reaching out to you in the near future to negotiate an easement for putting that sewer on your property, as well as discussing restoration methods and what needs to be done there. During construction, there will be some noise during normal business hours, which typically would be from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. For this particular project, the contractor hasn't been selected yet, but there will be some road closures, some lane closures that will be temporary to construct this work. The contractor that is selected will be required to provide a detailed traffic control plan to maintain access to the area. Maintain access, the contractor will be required to provide access for emergency vehicles to get into the area. I've listed some of the work along some of the main streets for the project that are anticipated. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about was temporary access to your residential property, or if you have a commercial property, there will be some temporary access issues to get in there. Now, you won't have issues getting into your actual house or your commercial building, but you may not be able to get into your driveway. And when that occurs, the contractor will let you know in advance when that will be happening. And then each evening when they finish during the trench that I talked about to build the sewer, they will be required to bring that trench backfill up to grade or cover it with a steel plate at the end of each day. So what will things look like when it's done? Okay, this is a construction project, so it will be disruptive when construction is ongoing. There'll be heavy machinery, the backhoes to dig the trench, to get down to the depths that are needed to construct the sewer. Now the good news is it's a temporary disruption, and at the end of that, we'll be able to provide better sewer service to you once construction is complete. The pictures on the slide that you see here are typical before, the picture in the middle during construction of a sewer project, and then at the end. So MSD is committed to restoring the site to what it was before, whether that be on a street, on a private property, or work that's being done for the inflow removal on private properties. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the when. So tentative construction schedule is shown. Currently, we're still in the design process. The easement acquisition, so those locations where a sewer needs to be constructed on a private property, MSD will be reaching out to those folks in the near future to set up meetings to discuss the easements. The PIR, property negotiations, those initial letters were sent out on August 5th to those 65 locations that both myself and Patricia noted. And we anticipate that those negotiations will take place over about the next 3 or 4 months. And then construction itself is anticipated to start around the middle of 2023. Now, currently, there's another construction project. If you are on the presentation here and you live in the vicinity of East Linden and Redbud, MSD is currently building the Deer Creek Sanitary Tunnel. And this project cannot start until that project is completed, because that's where the sanitary flows will tie into when this project is complete. So I did want to note too that construction start dates are approximate. They may change slightly, but if they do, MSD will be notifying residents before construction begins. So hopefully people have had the chance. Again, another reminder to ask questions, put your questions in there. We're going to jump to some frequently asked questions now with Patricia and myself. So Patricia, why is MSD doing this project?
MSD is removing storm flow from the sanitary sewer to be able to remove a combined sewer overflow from the system as required by the consent decree with EPA. In doing so, we will replace one combined system with 2 separate systems, a wastewater system and also a stormwater system, which will have different benefits for the community. First of all, removing the combined sewer overflow will have a positive impact on Black Creek's water quality moving forward. This project will also alleviate basement backups with a separate sanitary sewer. It will also alleviate yard flooding, basement flooding with a dedicated stormwater sewer.
Great, thank you, Patricia. Were there other options looked at?
Yes, we did. We looked at another option during the pre-design phase, and that option was to take the flow from the combined sewer over to the RDP Tribs tunnel with a small adit. And an adit is a smaller tunnel. But as Jeff mentioned before, the cost for that was just not cost effective for the district. Therefore, we selected separating the sewer system to keep the rates as low as possible while still complying with the consent decree.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, MSD is currently in the area constructing a storm sewer project near Winsenberg and Terrace Drive. Why is MSD going to be back in this area again?
Yes, there is currently a storm sewer project being constructed in the area. It's there to mitigate stormwater concerns. The stormwater project had to move forward to alleviate stormwater issues such as basement backups and yard flooding that was quite significant. And as Beth mentioned early on in this presentation, our stormwater and our wastewater projects are funded separately. So this project was funded separately. However, we did see both projects on the horizon. We did try and coordinate the 2 projects early on to minimize the impact to property owners and residents. However, there still are some properties that have to be touched twice through this process. First with the Linden Storm Project, and second in 2023 with this CSO separation project.
Okay, thank you. Which streets will be affected, on what dates, and during what hours?
That's a good question. However, I do not have an answer for you just yet. How this works is with MSD, we don't know that information before we select a contractor. This project is scheduled to bid in spring of 2023, which means construction would start in the summer. Then we select the contractor, and the contractor would be required to submit a traffic control plan. And at that time, we'd be able to answer this question quite effectively. And you also asked about working hours. Typically, the working hours for contractors are from 8 to 5, but we do check in with each municipality to ensure that we're staying in touch with their code and operating during the correct hours.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. A couple more frequently asked questions. Will residents have access issues to their property?
During the construction period, the contractor will notify you prior to performing work on your property or even on your street. In most cases, at the end of the day, the contractor will bring the trench to grade with either gravel or a steel plate that can be driven on.
Great, okay, thank you. Will trees be removed as part of the project?
Yes, trees may be removed to construct parts of this project. Property owners with trees that will need to be removed that are not located in an already existing easement will be compensated for the removal through the easement acquisition process. And as Jeff mentioned before, that's a process that's coming up fairly quickly. So those who are required to have an easement on their property will be contacted probably in the next month or two. And I also wanted to mention, I saw one of the questions that a resident wondered what's going to happen to the city trees. And I just want to let you know that we are in contact with the city. We are negotiating what will take place to replace the city trees.
Yes, thank you, Patricia. So at this time, I wanted to say thanks to everybody for coming in and participating in this virtual town hall meeting. Couple of quick reminders before we jump into the questions. Remind you that this is being recorded as Beth talked about, and it will be posted on MSD's website at the address that is located at the bottom of this slide. And again, questions that come in, if there are particular questions on your individual property, we will get back to you relative to getting you an answer on those questions. As Beth talked about, we just won't be answering those questions live at this time. So with that, Beth, have you got some questions that we got?
Hi, Jeff. Yes, we do. We have quite a few questions. And just a reminder, if you have questions, please use that Q&A feature. It's on the menu. So if you either wiggle your mouse or tap the screen, you should see a Q&A option. Open that up. That's where we're going to be taking questions tonight. And then another reminder that if you see a question that you really want answered, you can give it a like or give it an upvote, a little thumbs up. That'll help move it towards the top of our list so that we can make sure that we are answering the questions that the most participants are interested in. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and start reading those off in order. Our first question comes from Anne, and she is hoping that we can discuss potential tree injury on private properties. So, what do we do to protect trees or if a tree is injured on a private property?
So I can start off with answering that question. So relative to trees, as Patricia mentioned, if there are trees that are potentially impacted with the alignment of the new sewer, when that's on private property, that will be discussed during the easement negotiations. If there's a good option where we can avoid taking that tree down or injuring that tree, we'll make every attempt to do that.
Thanks, Jeff. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Our next question comes from Pauline. She asks, will the lateral relocations that occur on public property or the street affect a home's ability to use water during the day?
So again, I can start out answering that question. So at that time, when they're basically having to disconnect the lateral from the existing combined sewer and reconnect it to the new sanitary sewer, yes, there will be a short period of time where the contractor will notify you to let you know what's going on. And we would at that point ask you to not flush your toilet, run your dishwasher, run your laundry machine, so that reconnection can be made.
And sorry, Jeff, about how long might that time period be that they're going to be asked not to use their water services?
It typically would probably range from a couple of hours to maybe 4 or 5 hours, depending on the complexity of the connection that needs to be made. Most of the connections that will be within the street itself will be relatively straightforward. As the new sewer is being constructed, the new sewer is going to be a little bit deeper than the existing combined sewer. So as they're building that, they'll have those laterals exposed, and then it's really a matter of just doing a minor amount of plumbing to take that lateral from the old connection and reconnecting it into the new sewer.
Excellent. Cecilia asks, she says, my property does not seem to be highlighted in green, but I do have a driveway drain feeding into the sewer through the basement. Does this mean that it has been determined this is not needed in my specific case? Or could the map that you shared be incomplete?
So again, I can start out with that. About a year and a half ago, we did some field investigations to identify locations of those inflow sources and whether or not they were connected to the sanitary sewer. So some driveway drains, some downspouts, some area drains may be already connected to an existing separate storm sewer, or it may just daylight somewhere out onto a road or a yard somewhere. So that is likely the reason why your particular location was not identified.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeff. Let's see. Jack says that, it's clear that in your plans, certain neighbors will have their property used to benefit others. He says these property owners will be inconvenienced and will have their property used to benefit others. So he's asking, does MSD plan to compensate property owners who are having work done on their property?
I'm going to let Patricia or somebody from MSD take that one if that's okay.
Sure. The short answer is yes. If MSD is constructing a sewer that maybe borders two properties or it's fairly close to the property line, MSD will be acquiring an easement from you as well as your neighbor. And both property owners would be compensated through easement negotiations to allow us to install that sewer. Thanks,
Patricia. Our next question comes from Thomas. He says, I seem to recall 7 a.m. starts on the storm system. Is my memory incorrect, or is the storm sewer team working under different rules?
So I can take that one. So as we mentioned, typical working hours are from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. If there's an instance where the city of, in this case, it would be the city of Richmond Heights, in that area, if they allow working hours that are different than that, then we would leave that up to the contractor on what they wanted to do for that particular project. I think part of it would also depend on the timing. So for this project, as I mentioned, it's about a 2-year construction. Typically in the summertime, contractors like to start a little bit earlier. It's cooler, they can get more done before the really hot times during the middle of the day.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Our next question comes from Joni, and she asks, where will stormwater flows go if they are eliminated from inflow into the wastewater system?
So again, I can start out with that particular one. So for the private inflow sources, if those are currently connected to the sanitary sewer, where they'll go once they're removed, it's really property specific. It really depends on the arrangement of that property. In most cases, the water will flow across a yard, across maybe a driveway, and then flow naturally into a channel, which then would get into the separate storm sewer.
Perfect. Kathleen wants to know where Black Creek is.
I can pull up a map here real quick. Well, hopefully. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Black Creek is basically located behind the Galleria, and it continues south beneath the intersection of Brentwood and I-64 and I-70, and then continues south behind Target towards Maplewood, and it basically flows into Deer Creek.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Thomas. He asks, does MSD assume responsibility for hail or damage or theft for cars that are not in their driveway or garages because of construction?
That's one I'm going to have to turn over to somebody at MSD.
Steve, are you available to answer that question for us?
Yeah, I'm Steve Kadike and I'm in the construction group. Acts of weather damage for cars that are parked outside during construction process are not typically covered by MSD. That would be under either your automobile insurance or your homeowner's insurance.
Thanks, Steve. Our next question comes from Mike. He asks, he says, adding an easement on my property will likely decrease its value. How will this be addressed?
So for that particular question, what I would suggest is not knowing where that property is and where the proposed sewer is going. If we could get your contact information, we can certainly reach out to you individually to have that discussion if that's okay.
Rebecca says, I have noticed periods of time where there's no work going on for days at a time regarding Redbud last year, Terrace, Winsenberg this year. How can we be sure this project will be completed in a timely fashion? She says the Redbud project and associated street closures took a very long time, and during much of it, no work was being done and the street was still closed.
I can start, and then Patricia, if you wanna add in here. So for this project, when the construction starts on this project, there will be an MSD inspector that's assigned to the project. So he or she will be working with the contractor to make sure that the project continues to move on schedule. Patricia, was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yes, I would like to add that our contract documents with our contractor gives him a specific amount of time to complete the project, and we also allow for liquidated damages and things of that such if the project is delayed. But there are also included in the contract weather days. I think that's it.
Real quick, if you don't mind me jumping in there on this one. During the construction process, there are underground utilities that are often encountered that may or may not be in the exact location that was anticipated. And so sometimes there are delays related to relocating those utilities or working around. So when you do see the project paused for a moment, if you are interested in learning why, please contact the construction inspector of record, and they would be happy to let you know what the reason is for the delay.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, everyone. Our next question comes from Rebecca, and I know this is something that we talked about during the presentation, but certainly wouldn't hurt to address again. She asks, during open cut construction, will driveways be blocked? And will we be able to access our driveways from the street at all times during construction to park in our garages or behind our houses?
So I can take that question. So depending on where your house is and whether or not there's a sewer that's going to be built in the street, there may be a short period of time when the new sewer is being constructed within the street, maybe in front of your house where your driveway is, where there would be a temporary time where that access would be limited. Otherwise, in this particular project area, we're very fortunate that there are multiple ways to get access. So even if there's a road that's closed in one area where they're working on the sewer, there's a way for residents to drive around another street to get to their house and their driveway.
Rebecca also asks, if the road is blocked and access to our driveways or garages is blocked, where are we expected to park our cars?
So I'll start with that one, and then if anybody from MSD wants to join in. As Patricia mentioned, the contractor that gets selected for this project will be required to submit a traffic control plan. As part of that traffic control plan, that's also going to have to address parking, on-street parking, where that could be done for when that contractor is doing their work in specific areas for the project.
Our next question comes from Adam. He asks, what value does the storm sewer in the middle of Bryan, Buck, Kurt block provide? And if none of those properties produce private inflow problems?
Well, I can start with answering that question. So that particular location, as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, you know, MSD does both wastewater and stormwater, so they're responsible for both. So in this particular instance, that sewer that is along Bryan Avenue, if it's the location that I'm thinking this person's asking about, there were drainage issues and flooding issues in that area. So for that particular location, it made sense to roll that into the work that was going on with this project.
Adam also asks, how wide would the easements be?
So I can start with that. So typical easement would be anywhere from 10 to 20 feet wide, depending on the size of the pipe and the depth of the pipe, to allow the ability for MSD to maintain that sewer. However, it's really specific to each location and what is there, and whether or not there's an existing easement or other utilities in the area depends on what width that is. So that's certainly something that if they have a property where the sewer is going across, that we could get together with he or she to answer that question.
And then Adam also asks, will there be anything above ground on private properties from the storm sewers?
Well, I can start with this one as well. The only things that would be above ground for the storm sewers would be maybe an area inlet or a drain where the stormwater drainage would go into. There are a few locations on this project where we're putting in inlets of that nature on private property, again, and it will be through an easement process that is negotiated between MSD and that property owner.
Jeff, I also want to mention that the plans for the project are on our project website. So you're definitely welcome to go in and open up the plans, locate your property, and if you have any questions. As well, you're definitely welcome to just submit questions about your property. But I also want to note that in the future, within the next month or two, you will be contacted by a right-of-way agent. And this agent will come and discuss specifically the easement needs on your property, how the property will be brought back up to grade and made the same. So those discussions will take place. It's just a couple months out right now.
Thanks, Patricia. Our next question, also from Adam, he asks, for how long could a private residence expect construction on their property?
I can go ahead and take this one if you guys don't mind.
Perfect. No, perfect, Steve.
So the construction time frame is completely dependent on what type of work needs to occur on each property. It's highly variable because we're dealing with different depths and different types of facilities. So that's really a person by person question. We can't really give a general answer to time frames. And the way the contractor will approach the project is also variable. Depending on what strategies they use, we put this out as an open bid contract. And contractors, all they have to complete is the project from beginning to end. As they do the work throughout the middle of the job, they can move from place to place, but we do require that they meet timeframes to complete restoration within the parameters listed in the contract.
Thanks, Steve. Our next question comes from Pauline again. What is the estimated time frame for sections of the project? For example, will Bryan be worked on at a different time than Linden? And if so, how long would the Bryan portion take, or the Bemiston portion, or the Linden portion, et cetera?
Well, I'll start with this, and Pauline, that's a perfect question with what Steve just talked about. So within the contract documents and the requirements that we'll have the contractor do, we will require that contractor to do restoration, what we call sequential restoration. So what that means is that if he or she's working in one area, we'll require them to finish the restoration and the sewer work in that area before they just leave that and go to another area. So the actual time frame, I can't give you an exact answer on that, but we will have requirements, as Steve just talked about, to have them finish that restoration before they move to another area.
Thanks, Jeff. Our next question comes from Kathleen. She asks, how will we know what plans, such as the traffic control plans, the potential contractors have proposed, how will we be able to see those or know about those?
Well, I'll start with that, and then I will ask Patricia or Steve to ask about how folks can see that. So the way that happens is the contractor submits information to the owner, which is MSD, and the engineer, which in this case is HDR, for our review and approval of those plans. So like, for instance, a traffic control plan will lay out details of when they're proposing to close roads, or how long that would be, how they're going to address parking on the street, okay? And then we, as a team, owner and engineer, will review that and approve it. So I don't know if one of the MSD folks wants to chime in on how residents may be able to see that information.
Yeah, the best opportunity to gain that information once the construction has started is to contact the division inspector. We will have another public meeting once the project has been bid and we've selected a contractor. And we will do much of this same process, but we're going to be going into more specifics on the construction and what you can expect to see impacted on your property and within the whole area. And then we will also give you contact info to be able to acquire those traffic control plans and those items that you may have of interest.
Thanks, Steve. And we had a similar question from Jack. I'm guessing the answer is pretty much the same, but just want to check with you all. The plans online and sent are too vague to be able to see the specific details. So where can one see a detailed plan, he asks?
So as far as where you can see the detailed plan, so the slide that you can hopefully still see on your screen, which is the project website that's noted on the bottom of that plan there. If you go to that link and you scroll down, there are some document links within there. And one of those is a link to the current set of drawings or plan set, and that's where you can see the detail.
Perfect. Our next question comes from Peter.
Beth,
He asked, oh yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to add that if a resident is having some difficulty with the drawings and locating their property, feel free to reach out to Jeff Gratzer or myself, and we can assist with that.
Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, those plans, you know, if you don't know what you're looking at, it can be kind of hard. Appreciate it. Our next question comes from Peter. He asks, when you reach out to residents to discuss easements, will you have completed plans in hand? And will you know, for example, which trees might be impacted?
So I can answer that. Yes, we have what we are calling a 90% design in hand right now. The only remaining part of that is the negotiation of those easements. Those plans will show where existing trees are and what trees will be impacted by the construction of the new sewer. So yes, we'll have that. And then between that point, which includes easement negotiations and finalizing the documents for bidding, is where we might tweak that based on those easement discussions.
Thanks, Jeff. Our next question comes from Pauline again. When access to driveways will be blocked during regular working hours and then covered in the evening, will the contractor inform homeowners that vehicles in the driveway will be unable to leave during the workday ahead of time? And she says this is especially important if contractors end up starting at 7 a.m. rather than 8.
Yes. So the simple answer to that is yes, you will be notified. You'll actually be notified in advance of that. And Steve, I don't know if you can answer time frame of typically how far in advance the contractor lets the folks know?
Yeah, we typically want the contractor to give at least 7 days notice. But the good thing is with this project, we won't be sneaking up on anybody. I mean, we're going to be, you will see us coming.
Right.
We're going to have a big open trench, and it won't be a surprise when we get closer to your house. They will be, diligent to try to inform you when they're going to be closing your driveway and be in communication. And that is our goal, is to make sure that you do have access to and from your house whenever you need it. But sometimes they have to cross a driveway to put in sewer, so there will be some inconvenience, and we understand that that is frustrating.
Thanks, Steve. I got another question that might be good for you. I know you had mentioned that sometimes we run into utilities that we didn't expect. Earl asks, aren't all utilities clearly marked before construction starts? Our street already looks like an art project, so how are there surprises?
So the utilities are marked by Missouri One Call, but they do have a wide range of horizontal and vertical locations. So depending on when the utilities were installed, they can be off by as much as 5 or 6 feet laterally, and sometimes 5 or 6 feet vertically. So depending on when we have to put in our sewers and those locations, it's very easy to have a utility in the wrong location.
All right, and then our next question comes from Kathleen. She says she wants to know, can we see the contractor's proposals ahead of time?
So the contractor will start the submittal process once the bids have been opened. And usually there is a 2 to 3 month lag between when the contractor is awarded the contract and when they will actually start breaking ground. So in that time, we will have a public meeting before they actually break ground, and then that is when the plans and proposals will be available.
Thanks, Steve. That is the last question I have right now. We can give it a minute in case people want to type in additional questions. With that being said, we did have a few questions that related to personal property. And so I just want to let everyone know, I tried to respond to each of you to give you Patricia's contact information, but also to let you know that I will be passing those questions along to her so that she or someone on her team can respond to you in the next few business days. And we do have your contact information as well from when you registered. So that's how we'll reach out to you. But if you would prefer to reach out to her, maybe you have a preferred way of being contacted or a preferred time frame, you can contact her with that information, and also her information on the screen there. One other thing that I want to mention while we're giving people a minute or two to type in any last minute questions, and Jeff already mentioned this, but there is that project web page. The URL is on your screen right now. It's msdprojectclear.org/Brentwood Redbud. That is where we're putting all of the information about this project. So you can go there, find more information. We have an FAQ there that I'll be updating with the questions from this meeting, as well as any other questions that we get throughout the project. And then also we're recording this presentation. So we'll be posting that recording there so you can come back and visit it again. Let's see, we have a couple more questions that came in. Forgive me if I pronounce your name wrong, but Fareda asks, will this call be available for later viewing? Which I think I just answered, but yes, we will be posting it on that website there. Hopefully in the next couple of business days, it'll be up so you can revisit it throughout the project. And then Kathleen asks, is there an environmental impact statement on this project?
Sorry, I was muted. I can start with that, and then Patricia, if you want to jump in. There is not a specific environmental impact statement for this project. We did reach out to the Corps of Engineers regarding that type of permitting, sent them the plans, and they looked at the area where the work is being done, and they came back and indicated that there was no anticipated impact within this area.
Perfect, and that was our last question. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. Now, just a reminder that if you have further questions, Patricia and Jeff's contact information is there on the screen. There's also, if you go to the website that I mentioned there at the bottom of the screen, there's a button you can click to contact the project managers, so you can also reach them there. And again, that's a great place to go to find additional information on this project. With that, we thank all of you for joining us tonight. Big thanks to our panelists for all the great information that they passed along, and we look forward to revisiting all of you once we have a contractor. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.